Can police order you out of your car? The Supreme Court rule everyone gets wrong. Most drivers think a traffic stop works like this. You stay in your car, the officer stays outside, you answer a few questions. Maybe you get a ticket, maybe you get a warning. Then everybody leaves. But that's not how the law actually works, and every year drivers turn routine traffic stops into arrests because they misunderstand one critical decision point. Here's the moment. They rely on you not knowing your rights. This channel makes sure you do. Subscribe and stay informed. And if you believe more people need to see this, share it. And let me know your thoughts in the comments. The officer walks up to your window. He checks your documents. Everything seems normal. Then he says, "Step out of the vehicle for me." And the driver responds, "Why?" Or worse, "No, I'm staying in my car." That is the exact moment the encounter changes. Not because the officer found drugs, not because he discovered a warrant, not because you admitted wrongdoing. The decision point is whether you comply with the lawful order to exit the vehicle. Get that moment wrong, and a traffic stop that was heading toward a warning can suddenly become a physical removal, a resisting charge, or an arrest. Get it right, and the encounter usually stays controlled. Let's break down why. Imagine a completely ordinary traffic stop. Officer, good evening. License and registration. Driver, sure. The officer returns to his patrol car, runs your information. Everything appears normal. Then he comes back. All right, step out of the vehicle for me. Most people immediately think, I don't have to. After all, it's my car. I'm sitting peacefully. I haven't threatened anyone. Why should I get out? That's where the trap begins. The trap isn't the traffic violation. The trap isn't the officer's question. The trap is assuming that remaining in the vehicle is your decision. Many drivers mistakenly believe they get to negotiate this moment. Officer, step out of the vehicle. Driver, what's the reason? Officer, step out. Driver, I know my rights. Officer, step out of the vehicle. Driver, I'm not getting out until you tell me why. At this point, the conversation is already moving in the wrong direction because the officer isn't asking for permission. He's giving a lawful command. And the longer the argument continues, the more the officer's attention shifts away from the original traffic violation and toward your refusal. Now let's talk about why officers do this. Many people assume an order to exit the vehicle means the officer discovered something suspicious. Sometimes that's true, but often it isn't. Officers may ask drivers to exit for safety reasons. Maybe traffic is heavy. Maybe visibility is poor. Maybe the officer wants to separate occupants. Maybe he wants to conduct the remainder of the stop in a safer position. The key point is this: the order itself does not automatically mean you're in trouble. Yet many drivers interpret it as an accusation. That's why emotions suddenly rise. Officer, step out of the vehicle. Driver, what did I do? Officer, step out. Driver, am I under arrest? Officer, no, step out. Driver, then why do I have to? The driver believes he's defending himself. The officer sees a refusal, and that's where the decision point arrives. Here's the wrong response. Officer, step out of the vehicle. Driver, no. Simple, direct, and incredibly costly, because now the stop is no longer about the speeding violation. It's no longer about the broken taillight. It's no longer about the stop sign. Now it's about compliance with a lawful order. The officer repeats the command. Driver refuses again. The officer calls for backup. Additional units arrive. Tension increases. What began as a routine stop has become a confrontation, and none of it needed to happen. Now let's look at the correct response. Officer, step out of the vehicle. Driver, I will comply. That's it. 4 words. I will comply. Remember that phrase, I will comply. Not because you're admitting guilt, not because you're waiving defenses, not because you're surrendering rights. You're simply complying with a lawful order while keeping the encounter calm. Officer, step out of the vehicle. Driver, I will comply. Thank you. Notice what happened. No argument, no escalation, no challenge, no power struggle. The stop remains controlled, and that's exactly where you want it. Now, some viewers are probably wondering, what if I think the officer is wrong? What if I don't agree? What if I believe the order is unnecessary? Those questions are understandable, But roadside traffic stops are generally not the place where those disputes get resolved. The immediate issue is whether the officer can safely manage the encounter. Arguing about authority in that moment rarely helps the driver. Instead, it usually creates additional problems. Now let's talk about what happens next, because many officers don't stop after you exit. Officer, where are you headed tonight? Officer, anything illegal in the vehicle? Officer, mind if I take a look inside? This is where many people get confused. They correctly comply with the order to exit the vehicle, then they assume they must answer every additional question. Those are separate issues. The critical decision point we've been discussing is the exit order itself. Once you've complied, keep your responses calm and concise. Officer, step out of the vehicle. Driver, I will comply. A few moments later, Officer, where are you coming from? Driver, I'd prefer not to answer questions. Short, polite, professional. No attitude, no confrontation. The key is understanding the difference between compliance and argument. Compliance keeps the encounter controlled. Arguments create uncertainty, and uncertainty often creates escalation. Now let's briefly discuss the legal foundation. This entire issue traces back to a Supreme Court decision called Pennsylvania v. Mims. The court held that during a lawful traffic stop, an officer may, generally, order the driver out of the vehicle even without a separate reason beyond the stop itself. That's why so many drivers misunderstand this situation. They believe the officer must first explain the reason. In most cases, that's not required. The lawful traffic stop itself gives the officer authority to issue the exit order. That's the rule many people get wrong, and misunderstanding that rule is what turns ordinary stops into unnecessary confrontations. So let's review everything. The trap is believing you can negotiate an order to exit the vehicle. The decision point occurs the moment the officer says, "Step out of the vehicle." The wrong response is no, or not until you explain why. The consequence is that the officer's focus shifts from the traffic violation to your refusal. The correct response is simple: I will comply. Say it again: I will comply. 4 words, easy to remember, easy to use, and often the fastest way to keep a routine stop from becoming something much bigger. Because the smartest drivers understand that the encounter changes long before handcuffs appear. It changes at the decision point, the moment an officer gives a lawful order and decides whether you're going to cooperate or fight over it. The smartest drivers aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who recognize the decision point before the officer does.